A muffled laugh echoes down a narrow stone hallway. In the flickering lamplight, a shadow sways behind a tattered curtain. The warm night air is thick with the smell of oil lamps, wine, and something else, something musky and human. We're about to step into a brothel in ancient Pompeii, and trust me, these walls whisper secrets you'll never forget. Before we slip back 2,000 years, let me quickly say, if you find yourself enjoying this immersive journey, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. It really helps the channel. And I'd love to have you along for more time-traveling tales. And do me a favor, drop a comment letting me know where and when you're watching this. Are you on your couch after work, sitting with your morning coffee, late at night, under the covers? I love hearing from you and imagining our little community listening from all around the world. All right, ready? Take a deep breath. Let's time travel together. Imagine Pompeii, a bustling Roman town on the Bay of Naples. It's the summer of 79 CE, though locals don't know it. The city has only weeks left to live. By day, streets bustle with around 12,000 people, rich and poor, free and enslaved, going about their lives amidst public fountains, busy bakeries, taverns, and a grand stone amphitheater. You'd hear a lively mix of languages in the air. The local Oscan dialect, lilting Greek from traders and slaves, and the straightforward Latin of Rome. Pompeii is a melting pot, a trading town, where cultures meet and every narrow street teems with life. Now it's late afternoon. The sun dips low and bathes the city in a golden glow. You find yourself in a less traveled side alley, away from the marble columns of the Forum and the chatter of the markets. Here, the streets are tighter. The basalt paving stones under your sandals are worn smooth by generations of footsteps. A stray dog trots by, nose to the ground. The scent of baking bread drifts from a nearby shop, mingling oddly with the tang of salt air. The sea isn't far. On the wall of a corner building, something unusual catches your eye. A small carved symbol, unmistakably a phallus, etched into the stone. A few steps on, you see another pointing like an arrow down the lane ahead. You smirk at the crudeness, but these carvings are actually directions. In Pompeii, carved phalluses on walls or even on the street pavement guide those in the know toward the city's pleasure houses. And clearly, you're heading the right way. Rounding a corner, you nearly collide with a pair of men stumbling out of a wine shop. They're laughing loudly, red-faced from drink, and one slurs something about finding that Greek girl before nightfall. They stagger ahead, following the same trail of carvings. You decide to tail them at a distance, heart thumping with curiosity about where this secret route leads. As the sun kisses the horizon, you arrive at a modest two-story building of faded brick and plaster. It looks like an ordinary house at first. No flashy sign, nothing overt. Respectability is all a facade here, but subtle cues give it away. A couple of smoky oil lamps are fixed by the entrance, already lit as dusk approaches, and faint giggles and voices drift from within. This is it, Vicolo del Lupanare, the street of the wolf's den. In ancient slang, lupa, she-wolf, means prostitute, and lupanar literally means brothel, the wolf den. You've found Pompeii's most infamous brothel, known simply as the Lupanar, the largest of the city's many hidden houses of pleasure. You pause outside the doorway. There's a small wooden awning above, and beneath it stands an older woman, with her arms crossed. She's solidly built, with gray streaks in her dark hair, and a no-nonsense expression. She might be in her 50s, which in this age means she's seen and survived a lot. This is the madam, the overseer of the establishment. Her eyes flick over you, assessing, and for a moment you worry you look too much like a curious outsider. But plenty of outsiders come here. Pompeii is a vacation town for Rome's wealthy and a port of call for traders and sailors. The lupanar welcomes locals and travelers alike. Gold and bronze coins spend the same, after all. Above the madam's head, just to the side of the entrance, the wall is scrawled with layer upon layer of graffiti. You make out crude Latin letters scratched into the plaster. One large carving reads, Eutychis, Graeca, Puella, Moribus Bellis, Tu Asibus. You puzzle it out. Eutychus, a Greek lass with sweet ways. Tu Assis. It's basically an advertisement for a prostitute. Name, origin, and price. Carved right into the wall for passers-by to see. A bit of ancient marketing. 2. Asses no snickering. An as is a small Roman coin, is dirt cheap. The price of a couple loaves of bread. Why advertise so low? Perhaps Eutychus was new, or looking for more business. The graffiti looks a little older, weathered. Eutychus might have been here some time ago, or maybe she's inside tonight. Who knows? Either way, the walls themselves are literally whispering to us, offering hints of who and what waits within. The 2 drunken men you followed have already pushed past the madam and gone inside. One of them, shouting a friendly Ave. Felicia, to announce himself. The Madam Felicia, perhaps, rolls her eyes and mutters under her breath. Then she turns to you with a thin smile, looking for a good time. Love, she asks in a husky voice. Before you can answer, she pulls open the heavy curtain over the door and ushers you through. You step over a high threshold into the dim interior, and the hot, stuffy air of the place immediately envelops you. A pair of oil lamps mounted on the walls cast a dull orange glow. The walls were once white plaster, but now they're stained with soot and years of human touch, and everywhere on them are more scratches and scrawls. A graffiti gallery of lust and bragging. It's hard to focus. The space is cramped, and your senses are being bombarded all at once. A giggling girl, barely more than a teenager, brushes past you, leading one of the drunken customers by the hand. She's lithe, with kohl-lined eyes and a forced smile. The customer, a red-faced, middle-aged man in a merchant's toga, winks at you as he's tugged toward one of the small doorways lining the hall. You catch a glimpse inside the little room, a narrow platform of brick or stone, like a raised slab, with a thin padding of worn mattress on top. That's the bed. The couple disappears behind a threadbare curtain that serves as a door. Most of the doorways here have no real doors, just curtains or hanging beads for a shred of privacy. Almost immediately, you hear the merchant's boisterous laugh and the girl's higher-pitched giggle from behind the fabric. Business is starting. Your eyes adjust to the gloom. The lupanar's layout is basically a corridor with 5 little cubicles on the ground floor. Each cubicle is just big enough for that stone bed and maybe a small oil lamp. It's cramped and windowless in here. The only light and air come from the front door and a couple of tiny high vents. In the dusk, it's sultry. The walls seem to sweat with humidity and the ghosts of perfume. You can understand why the owners hung lamps and decorated the walls with paintings, anything to distract from the claustrophobia of these cramped cells. And those paintings, you can't miss them, even in the dim light. You see large frescoes painted right above each doorway. They are strikingly erotic depictions of men and women in various intimate entanglements. In one, a dark-haired woman straddles a man on a bed, not unlike the ones here. In another, a couple is shown from behind in a passionate embrace. The images are surprisingly graphic. For a moment you blush. It's like walking into a 2,000-year-old adult film. Some paintings are a bit artful and sensual, others more crude, as if different artists of varying talent had a go. One fresco makes you chuckle. It shows a slim woman standing beside a bed, pointing to a painted picture on the wall, while a nude man reclines on the mattress. It's almost meta. A picture of a prostitute showing a client a picture to choose a service. Perhaps another fresco at the far end shows the god Priapus, grotesquely endowed with not one but two erect phalluses, grinning as if blessing the whole enterprise. These images aren't just decoration. They're possibly the menu of services on offer, or at least a clever way to set the mood and give customers ideas. Whether you're a nervous first-timer or speak a different language, you can literally point at a painting to indicate your preference. No awkward conversation needed. Under one lamp, the plaster is scrawled with more graffiti. You squint and make out a few in the jumble of Latin letters. Hic ego puellas, multas. Futui is etched boldly at eye level. If your Latin's rusty, that means here I. Many girls. The bluntness makes you snort. It seems even first-century guys like to brag. It's basically an ancient I was here with a macho twist. Another carving right below it reads, Felix bene, futuis, which can be cheekily translated as lucky guy. You screw well. Apparently a compliment from a prostitute to a client, or perhaps from one patron to another. These walls are full of such notes. Over 100 graffiti have been cataloged in this single brothel. The effect is almost like a social media wall of its day, filled with crude reviews, jokes, and greetings between visitors. You realize Pompeii's citizens, even those who couldn't write elegantly, loved to leave their mark. In fact, graffiti was commonplace all over the city. It was how ordinary people recorded their lives, loves, and insults. Here in the Lupanar, the graffiti is extra candid. It's the voice of the many men, and even some women, who pass through, and perhaps the women who worked here too. The walls whisper their conversations if you know how to listen. As you walk further inside, Madame Felicia snaps her fingers to get your attention. Welcome, darling, she says with a practiced smile. First time here? Come, there's room for you. She steers you by the shoulder toward the back, where a narrow staircase leads up to the second floor. Upstairs or down? You choose. We've got the fanciest girls upstairs, and a bigger bed if you're feeling flush. Costs a bit more? Of course. She winks. Indeed. You recall hearing that this brothel has an upper level with another 5 rooms, reportedly a little larger than the ground floor cubicles. Perhaps upstairs is where wealthier clients get a tad more luxury, thicker mattresses, maybe a private wash basin, or better breeze. Down here on the ground floor, it's the quick and dirty business. You hesitate, not sure what or whom you actually want. Felicia takes that as indecision on price. No worries. Take your time. Have a look around, she says, gesturing down the hall. The evening's just getting started. We've got fresh faces tonight, too. At that, from a shadowy corner, you notice a young woman sitting quietly on a stool, almost hidden behind a doorway. She's slender and looks very young, perhaps 17, 18 at most. Her dark hair is pulled back in a simple braid, and she's nervously picking at the frayed edges of her tunic. Unlike the other girls, who are already flirting or leading customers by the hand. This one seems unsure what to do with herself. Felicia follows your gaze and clicks her tongue. That one's new. Came in this morning. Her tone is a mix of annoyance and sympathy. Pretty, isn't she? Greek. I think, still learning our language. She calls out to the girl in a mix of clunky Greek and Latin. Come here. Core. Girl. Likely she hasn't bothered to learn the new girl's name yet. The girl flinches at the sudden attention, but obediently rises and steps into the lamplight. You see her face now. She's indeed pretty, with high cheekbones and wide brown eyes that glint with fear. There's a bruise fading on her left forearm, perhaps a parting gift from the journey that brought her here. She keeps her arms crossed over her chest defensively. Her tunic is plain and a bit oversized, slipping off one shoulder, revealing a hint of a slender collarbone. You notice she's barefoot. Nearly all the prostitutes are, perhaps to give an air of casual nudity, or maybe because sandals are a privilege not granted to slaves indoors. This one's called Cressa. The madam tells you, patting the girl's shoulder. The girl forces a tiny smile at you when she hears her new name, Cressa. It simply means the Cretan girl, or from Crete. It's more a label than a real name. You wonder what her original name was before she was dragged into this life. But Felicia doesn't care about that. She's already selling her. Sweet as honey and fresh as spring water, she coos, lifting the girl's chin with a finger. Only 2 asses for a quick tumble. A bargain for a beauty from Greece. 2 small copper coins. Literally the same price as Eutychus's graffiti outside advertised. It dawns on you that such low rates likely mean these girls, especially the new and foreign ones, are slaves with no say in their price. The goal is to attract lots of customers. Cycle them through. In this job, quantity trumps quality. Cressa's eyes meet yours for a second. There's a pleading in them, or maybe it's just terror. It must be overwhelming. Last week, she might have been in a very different world. And now she's here, expected to be naked on display, with a price tag hanging over her. Sometimes, literally, ancient Roman writers like Horace actually remarked how prostitutes were visible and could be inspected head to toe by clients, unlike respectable women who stayed covered. Here, that reality is stark. A customer can appraise Cressa like merchandise, and she has to pretend to like it. Felicia tuts when neither you nor the girl speak. She's got no time for dawdling. All right, sweeties, how about a drink first? She snaps her fingers at a younger boy lounging by the stairs, possibly her assistant or a slave errand boy. Get our guest some wine and water it lightly. We don't want him too drunk to pay. She adds under her breath with a smirk. The boy scurries off to what you assume is a back room or kitchen area. Taking the moment of respite, you lean against the wall near Cressa. She stands there, shifting her weight nervously from one foot to another. In halting Latin, heavily accented with Greek, she whispers, "You first time here." You realize she's been coached to make small talk. The line comes out rehearsed and uncertain. You give a gentle nod and ask her name in Greek. Her eyes widen, hearing her native tongue from you. She's quick to respond in a flurry of Greek, but then catches herself and switches back to basic Latin. Name. Cressa, she says obediently, probably fearing the madam's disapproval if she uses the wrong language with a client. You tell her your name softly, and that you mean no harm. For a moment, her shoulders relax. It strikes you that treating her like a person, not just an object, is a tiny kindness she probably rarely gets. Before you can converse more, Felicia returns with a clay cup of diluted wine and thrusts it into your hand. Drink up. You'll have a fine time. Trust me. She then barks at Cressa. Go make yourself ready. The girl nods and slips behind a curtain into one of the empty rooms, presumably to prepare for her next customer, possibly you. The madam gives you a conspiratorial nudge. Be gentle with that one. She's still skittish, but they all learn fast. Her voice has a touch of hardness. You're reminded that to Felicia, these girls are both her charges and her investments. She likely acquired Cressa for a fee from a slave trader or as a transfer from another brothel, and she needs to turn a profit on her. In the hierarchy of Roman vice, Felicia might be a freedwoman running the operation for an owner above her. Or perhaps she's still a slave herself, tasked with managing the others. Hard to know. Either way, her veneer of friendliness is business. In a lower voice, she adds, almost to herself, Poor thing's been crying all day. I had to threaten to chain her up to stop the sobbing. You glance at her, startled. Felicia meets your eye with a flat look. Not exactly proud, but resolute. Girls that don't cooperate don't last. I'd rather scare her now than have the owner do worse later. The reality hits hard. Most of these women are enslaved. They don't choose to be here. They are property, expected to smile and cater to paying strangers night after night until their youth or health gives out. Felicia's brusque management suddenly makes sense. It's a cruel world, and she's enforcing the rules that keep these girls useful to the brothel owner for as long as possible. The truth of Pompeii's brothels is indeed harsh and heartbreaking. Even Felicia's matter-of-fact tone can't hide that. You sip the watered wine, trying to process this as the sounds of the brothel swell around you. From one occupied cubicle comes a rhythmic creaking of a bed and low moans. The merchant and the giggling girl have clearly gotten down to business. Across the hall, one curtain is drawn back, and you see a tall woman with henna-dyed hair lounging idly on her stone bed, waiting for the next client. She catches you looking and gives a little wave and a wink, playfully hiking up her tunic to reveal a shapely thigh. She's probably one of the more experienced prostitutes here, comfortable in her role, or at least a very good actress. Her name, scrawled above her doorway, is Restituta. You can read it painted decoratively in red beside an erotic mini fresco. Restituta cum moribus bellis. It says Restituta with sweet ways. Felicia notices you admiring the redhead. Ah, Restituta, a real veteran. That one, she'll show you a good time if Lil Cressa isn't to your liking. Restituta must have been here long enough to earn a kind of marquis status. A named lady with a tagline sweet ways is a common slogan in these walls, hinting she's skilled at pleasing. The fact her name is on the wall in paint, not just scratched later, suggests the house itself is advertising her, almost like a brand. Perhaps she's a freedwoman who chose to stay in the trade, or simply a slave who has survived here for years and become a fixture. As if on cue, the front curtain rustles, and in walks a familiar figure, a plump, balding man carrying a small basket. He's dressed in a somewhat worn tunic and smells faintly of flour. You recognize him. He's a baker from a shop near the Forum. You likely bought a loaf from him this morning. He greets Felicia with a polite nod and goes straight to Restituta's cubicle. Evening, my star, he says warmly in Latin. Restituta's face lights up in a genuine smile. Marcus, you're late. I was starting to think you'd found another girl to warm your bed. She teases. Marcus chuckles, patting her hand as he sits on the edge of her stone bed. Never. My dear, you know my wife would kill me if I so much as looked at another woman. They both laugh at this. It's an odd joke. Essentially, Restituta is another woman, but clearly, this arrangement doesn't count in Marcus's mind. In Roman society, visiting prostitutes isn't considered adultery or a serious breach of morality for a man. Wives might dislike it, but it's seen as a normal outlet. A man's needs met without entangling emotions or illegitimate children that could threaten family inheritance. Marcus the baker apparently draws a firm line between a fling with a sex worker and an affair with a free woman. It's a social contradiction that Romans navigate with a straight face. From your spot in the hall, you watch as Restituta and Marcus converse softly. The basket he brought is unwrapped to reveal fresh figs and a small loaf. He must have come straight from his bakery with these treats. You spoil me, Restituta purrs, popping a fig into her mouth. So ripe. Marcus smiles broadly, clearly pleased with himself. He gently touches her hair, and you realize there's a tenderness between them that seems real. Perhaps he's been coming to see Restituta for months, maybe years. He might even consider her a friend in his way. For Restituta, he might be a favored regular, someone who's kind, who brings little gifts, who doesn't hurt her. In a life as hard as hers, that's no small thing. Felicia sidles up next to you and whispers, "Those two, cute, aren't they? He's a good man, always pays, never causes trouble, brings her bread, so she doesn't have to eat the stale scraps I give the others." Her pragmatic veneer slips just a bit, revealing a hint of empathy. We get a few like him, falls in love a little. I think, she shrugs, as if to say, what can you do? You notice she doesn't rush Marcus at all. He's likely paying for an hour or more, and she knows he'll be gentle with Restituta. And out by closing time, Marcus and Restituta share a quiet laugh. She's likely told a joke or complimented his baking. As they draw the curtain partially closed, you hear her say in a low, genuinely fond tone, "Come, lie down. You look tired today." His response is inaudible, but you imagine him awkwardly pulling off his sandals, settling onto that hard bed. Restituta's cubicle feels almost warm compared to the cold transactions happening elsewhere, like a tiny oasis of intimacy in a desert of commercial sex. For a moment, you even feel a pang of emotion. Is it possible that within this bleak place, two people have formed a small bond of kindness? It's transactional, yes, but maybe also human. Your thoughts are interrupted by a burst of raucous laughter from the front room. The two drunk friends who entered earlier are back in the hallway, one tugging up his trousers, the other wiping his mouth as if he just downed another cup of wine. They are done already. Their romps were quick, not uncommon when the goal is a fast release. One of them, a lanky fellow with a laurel tattoo on his arm, claps the other on the back. That one, what was her name? Fortunata. By Jupiter, she's a wildcat. He crows, loud enough for half the building to hear. Fortunata must still be behind the curtain somewhere, hopefully rolling her eyes at his lack of decorum. The madam swiftly intercepts the men to collect payment if she hasn't already. You see coins flash in the lamplight as Felicia counts them out on her palm. She's careful. Some drunks try to skip out or shortchange the house. Not these two, apparently. They pay their due and stagger out into the night, still joking crudely as they depart. One slaps a hand against the wall near the doorway and shouts, "Long live Pompeii," then breaks into a fit of laughter when they're gone. Felicia looks at the greasy handprint left on her wall and mutters, "Filthy plebs," under her breath, though not without a tiny grin. Money is money, with dusk turning to darkness outside. The evening rush truly begins. A couple of young Roman soldiers on leave wander in Pompeii, has no stationed legion, but plenty of soldiers pass through from nearby garrisons. They flirt boisterously with the madam, who assigns them two girls. One eagerly pulls a brawny soldier toward a room, while the other soldier, barely out of boyhood, gets shy and needs Felicia to gently nudge him toward Cressa's curtain. Yes, our Greek newcomer is now open for business. She's managed to compose herself. Her hair has been rebraided neatly, and her tunic is adjusted to show just a bit more skin. You catch a glimpse of her, nervously welcoming the young soldier. Her hands tremble as she lifts the curtain for him, but she forces a smile. Felicia watches hawk-like from a distance, ready to intervene if the client gets rough or if Cressa panics. That is the new girl's first customer ever. You realize, gods, she can't be older than 18, and some boy is about to clumsily use her body because he paid a few coins. You feel a knot in your stomach. There's nothing romantic or titillating about the look of fear and resignation on her face as the curtain falls closed. Perhaps sensing your discomfort, Felicia pats your shoulder. It's always hard the first few times, she says, not unkindly. Whether she's referring to Cressa or to you observing this, it's unclear, but life goes on. She'll learn, or she doesn't finish the sentence, or she won't last here. You know what she means. Rather than follow that dark thread just now, you let your attention drift across the brothel's other occupants. Each doorway, each graffiti-scrawled wall seems to have a story. If you look closely, the whispers of the lupanar aren't only in Latin scratches or explicit paintings. They're in the human interactions playing out in real time around you. From the cubicle nearest the street, you hear a soft sobbing and low murmurs. Peering subtly around the edge of the wall, you see a girl with ash blonde hair sitting on the lap of a portly older man. Her head rests on his shoulder as she sniffles, and the man, dressed in a respectable tunic with a narrow purple stripe, a minor local official, perhaps, strokes her hair almost fatherly. There, my sweet Victoria. He coos. You catch his words. You remind me of my own daughter. Gods forgive me. He presses a coin into her hand. Keep this. Buy yourself something nice at the market tomorrow. She lifts her head, wiping tears from her mascara-smudged eyes, and forces a smile at him. You are too kind, sir, she says shakily. They kiss. Not a passionate lover's kiss, but something oddly tender and triste. It seems Victoria had an emotional moment, real or expertly feigned, and that touch of vulnerability struck the man's heart. Maybe he lost a daughter, or maybe he's just lonelier than he thought. Either way, he's paid extra to comfort and be comforted, not just for sex. As he departs, he actually bows to her. She stays on the bed a moment after he leaves, examining the coin in her palm, a silver denarius, much more than her usual fee. Her crying stops at once, and she tucks the coin into a crack in the wall where, presumably, she hides her tiny personal stash. Was that whole scene an act to tug his heartstrings? Possibly. Or perhaps her tears were genuine, and he responded kindly. In Pompeii's brothel, emotional truth and performance often blur. The illusion of affection can be as valuable as the physical act itself. Meanwhile, near the foot of the stairs, a rowdy commotion erupts. The two Roman soldiers have finished with their sessions. The older soldier, with the big ego, is boasting to Felicia about his exploits in Gaul, slapping his thigh, while the younger one, the boy who went with Cressa, stands by, looking a bit shell-shocked. The poor lad's cheeks are flushed, and he avoids eye contact as his comrade jokes, "Did our little junior finally become a man tonight?" The younger one only nods silently. fiddling with the strap of his sandal. You notice Cressa peeking out from her curtain, her expression unreadable. Perhaps the soldier was quick and not cruel. One can hope her first experience here was not a horror. Felicia collects their coins. The older one tries to haggle that his lad only lasted half the time, so should pay half. Felicia shuts that down swiftly with a glare. As they depart, the older tosses a copper coin on the ground for the girls to share a drink. It's a stingy gesture, but Felicia will make sure it goes into the house coffer, not the girls' hands. The soldiers clank out into the night, duty done, in more ways than one. Suddenly, the front door curtain flutters and a new figure enters briskly. He's clad in a dark hooded cloak, despite the warm night, clearly trying not to be recognized. As he slips inside, he pushes back his hood and you see he's young, maybe early 20s, with fine, almost delicate features. By his bearing and the quality of that cloak's fabric, he is upper class, perhaps even noble. You notice a signet ring flash on his finger as he hastily hides it in a pocket. This is someone who does not want to be seen here. Madame Felicia greets him with a polite nod. "Good evening, sir." There's a slight questioning in her voice, as if she's unsure how to address him. He doesn't give his name. In a low voice, he murmurs, "Is she here? Did she get my message?" Felicia's eyebrows arch slightly. "Yes, we got your letter." A letter. It's not common for Johns to send notes ahead. Intriguing. Felicia gestures him toward the stairs. "Go on up. She's waiting in the last room on the right." The young man nods and all but scurries up the staircase 2 steps at a time. His cloak flutters behind him like a shadow. Well, a mystery on the 2nd floor. Unable to restrain your curiosity, you quietly follow partway up the stairs, pretending to admire a crude erotic scribble on the wall. The stairs creak as you ascend just enough to peek onto the upper landing. Up here, a single oil lamp casts long shadows. The hallway ceiling is low. You have to duck. There are indeed 5 doors. Actual wooden doors up here. Not just curtains. A bit more private and upscale. The last door on the right is closed, but you hear hushed voices from within. Against the illicit quiet, you make out the young man's voice. "I had to see you." Another voice, a woman's, responds in a tone that's equal parts affection and worry. "You shouldn't have come." What if someone saw you? The cadence of her Latin is refined. She's educated, likely not a slave-born girl. The crack in the door is thin, but through it you glimpse lamplight and the edge of a bed where the pair now sit. His hood is off, revealing short, well-groomed brown hair. He's actually shaking a little, either from nerves or emotion. "I don't care anymore," he says. "I'll buy your freedom. I swear it." My father. At that word, your breath catches. Father, buy your freedom. This is the son of someone rich or powerful, in love with a brothel woman. The father likely would be scandalized. The woman inside shushes him gently. You can't see her fully, but her hand comes into view, stroking his cheek. By the gods! She's wearing several gold rings and a fine bracelet. Those aren't things a common prostitute here would wear. Most have no jewelry, except maybe cheap bangles. Could she be a freedwoman courtesan? Or perhaps a well-kept mistress, moonlighting as a prostitute at this brothel for secrecy? The plot thickens. Your father must never know. She whispers, "If he disowns you, what then? I'd be worse off than now." He clutches her hand. "Victoria, I cannot live without you." He nearly sobs. "Ah, Victoria, the blonde who was crying earlier. It seems she's quite the actress." switching roles from a weepy girl with one client to this romantic heroine with another. Or maybe this is her true feeling. And the sobbing before was an act. It's hard to tell. Perhaps both are performances in a way. You recall that name list of graffiti. Victoria's name was indeed among those known to work here. She might be a freed woman. The jewelry suggests she has resources or generous patrons who continues at the brothel, either by choice or necessity. And she's caught the heart of a nobleman's son, a dangerous game. Or possibly an exit strategy if he actually follows through on freeing her. The young man, let's call him Publius, a common noble name, speaks more urgently now. I've saved nearly enough. One more purse from my allowance. I'll give it to your owner. We'll be gone before anyone notices. Victoria's voice breaks softly. You dream. My love, where would we go? Rome. You'd be a senator's disgrace, with a former prostitute on your arm. He protests, but she's not wrong. Roman society is unforgiving. As a prostitute, Victoria is considered among the lowest classes. Legally infamous, disreputable, stripped of many citizen rights, even if freed. That stigma remains. Publius marrying her, if that's what he imagines, would be social suicide for his family. There's a silence, then quiet sobbing. His, hers, or both. You feel a pang of sympathy. This is a classic scene straight out of Roman poetry or comedy. The young aristocrat in love with the courtesan. Except here, it's painfully real. It strikes you that behind the transactions of sex, there can be genuine feelings in play, or at least genuine anguish. The walls of this place have absorbed not only lustful grunts, but also whispered endearments and tearful promises. These emotions, too, are part of the whispers. Realizing you shouldn't eavesdrop further, lest Madame Felicia catch you snooping upstairs where you technically haven't paid to be. You tiptoe back down. As you descend, a thought occurs. The graffiti, perhaps Publius or Victoria themselves, scratched something on these walls to mark their star-crossed tryst. You scan the graffiti near the stairwell. Amid the usual crude notes, one faint line stands out. Marcellus Victoriae cupit. It's a bit hard to read, but it looks like Marcellus desires Victoria. Perhaps Marcellus is a code name or another admirer, but it could just as well be Publius writing under an alias, declaring affection. A romantic graffiti among the vulgar ones. How about that? The wall truly holds all sorts of whispers, from bragging conquests to genuine yearning. Back on the ground floor, Felicia eyes you with a slight frown. Didn't find what you were looking for upstairs, she asks. You shrug innocently and mumble something about too crowded. She doesn't press. There are other customers to tend to. It's fully night now. The brothel is humming. A group of sailors on shore leave has arrived. 4 loud, sunburned men who smell of fish and sea. They slap a few coins on Felicia's desk. Yes, there's a small table by the entrance that serves as her station, and basically want whoever's available. Immediately, 2 of the older prostitutes, including our redhead restituta, take one each by the arm, adeptly corralling the raucous men into rooms with playful banter. The sailors likely don't care about names or faces. Just a release, another sailor, missing 2 front teeth and already quite drunkard, lurches toward Cressa's cubicle. Uh-oh. Cressa has just finished with another client and is peeking out, looking exhausted and dazed, seeing the burly, unsteady sailor. Her eyes widen with fear. She shoots a pleading look to Felicia, who quickly intercepts the man. Easy there, Tiger, the madam says, forcing a laugh as she physically blocks him from the trembling girl. That one's resting? How about Ias here? She practically shoves forward a different girl, a petite, raven-haired prostitute with a confident smile. The sailor grumbles, but Aias skillfully distracts him by boldly grabbing his crotch through his tunic, making him yelp in surprise and delight. As Aias leads him off, Felicia casts a warning glance at Cressa. Stay hidden. The new girl slips back into her corner, drawing the curtain gratefully. The last of the four sailors is a lanky, quiet fellow, younger than the rest, and not as rowdy. He stands awkwardly in the hall, clearly not sure how to proceed. Felicia nudges Victoria, who has come back downstairs after sending her noble lover off, wiping her eyes gently. Take care of that one. Vicky, she instructs under her breath. Victoria approaches the shy sailor with a practiced warm smile. You watch as she speaks softly to him, and he relaxes a little. They disappear behind a curtain together, Victoria already cooing about how strong his arms look from hauling sails, eliciting a bashful chuckle from the lad. It's astonishing how these women can switch personas at the drop of a coin. From a tragic lover moments ago to a flirty seductress now. But that's the job. Acting is part of their survival toolkit. In fact, an inscription on a wall here might as well read, "All the world's a stage. Even this tiny stage of a brothel, not all is laughter and romance. Though, as the night deepens, the uglier side of this life shows itself." One of the sailors, the missing teeth brute who ended up with ES, suddenly staggers out of his cubicle, half-dressed, anger contorting his face. Thief, he barks, grabbing Aias by the wrist as she tries to follow him out calmly. This harpy stole my coin pouch. Aias protests fiercely. I did no such thing. You drunk swine. You probably dropped it in your trousers. The sailor's face reddens. He's clearly beyond reason, and perhaps his pouch really is missing. Though it could have fallen under the bed, or he spent more than he realized on wine earlier. Either way, in his mind, the girl is an easy scapegoat. He raises his hand, and smack. He backhands Aias across the face, hard. She cries out and stumbles, a red mark blooming on her cheek. In an instant, Felicia is in front of the sailor, surprisingly fast, despite being older and shorter. She stands toe-to-toe with him, fury in her eyes. You dare strike one of my girls in my house, she growls. The sailor sneers. Stay out of this, old witch, unless you want the same. He moves, as if to hit Felicia too. For a split second, you feel your heart pound. Is he about to start a brawl? But Felicia doesn't flinch. In a blur, she produces a short wooden club from under her skirts. You later realize she had a cudgel strapped to her thigh this whole time. For just such an occasion, thwack, she lands a solid blow across the man's knee. He howls in pain and collapses against the wall. Instantly, two of his sailor buddies emerge, half-dressed and alarmed. But by now, Felicia is the embodiment of wrath. Get out, all of you, she hisses, brandishing the club. One burly sailor looks ready to retaliate, but the others pull him back, muttering that the city guards will be on them if a ruckus spills outside. The toothless one limps, cursing, as his comrades gather him up and retreat out the door, still in disarray. And don't you bastards come back unless you want your skulls split. Felicia shouts after them. The brothel falls silent after that eruption of violence. Only the crackle of oil lamps and a distant muffled sob are heard. You release a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Felicia exhales too, rubbing her temple. The illusion of the brothel as a fun, sexy playground has been shattered for the moment, revealing the brute reality beneath. Exploitation and danger are ever present. These women endure violence as an occupational hazard, and the only line of defense might be a madam's club, or the slim chance of a kindly client intervening. There's no Roman legion coming to protect these she-wolves. The law cares little for the plight of infames. In fact, legally, a prostitute, especially if enslaved, has virtually no rights. A customer might be punished for damaging someone's property since a slave is property, but not for the assault itself in any moral sense. It's chilling to realize Felicia turns to Aias, whose cheek is now swollen and eyes filled with tears of shock and pain. The madam's face softens a fraction. "Let me see," she says quietly. Aias sniffles, but stands strong as Felicia examines her cheek. "It's all right," Aias whispers unconvincingly. "Felicia tut tuts. Kitchen. Now, put a cold compress on that." She ushers Ias toward the back room, supporting her by the elbow, in a rare show of gentleness. "As she passes by you," Felicia mutters, "this is why we water the wine. Fools get drunk enough on their own." You notice her hand trembling slightly. Once Ias isn't looking, the adrenaline of the confrontation is wearing off. And Felicia, despite her tough exterior, is a woman in midlife who just faced down a raging sailor. She's probably a bit shaken too, though she'd never admit it. The other girls peek out from curtains, assessing if the coast is clear. Seeing the men gone, a couple of them exchange glances and small smiles, a silent acknowledgement of respect for the madam. Felicia may be harsh, but she does protect them as best she can. Not all brothels are so lucky. Some pimps might have beaten the girl for causing trouble, rather than the client. Here, at least, the boss was on their side. The night wears on, and the human stories keep unfolding, one encounter after another. In one cubicle, you observe a gray-haired man in rich robes, a wealthy merchant or minor noble, lecturing a bored-looking prostitute about philosophy instead of doing much else. Perhaps he just wanted someone to talk to in private, where he can be himself. In another, through a gap in the curtain, you glimpse a young married woman. Yes, a woman. Nervously, meeting a handsome male attendant. It appears one of the girls is actually a young man, dressed in a woman's tunic, makeup and all. He gently kisses the lady, who has likely snuck out from her strict household for a taste of forbidden passion. The brothel caters to many desires, it seems, including those not spoken in polite society. Rome quietly tolerates such things as long as they're kept discreet. A woman having an affair is scandalous, but if she pays a sex worker, male or female, maybe that's her loophole, though a risky one. Between these vignettes, you feel the ebb and flow of the lupanar's rhythm. Men and occasionally women come in seeking something. Pleasure, comfort, domination, escape. And the prostitutes do their best to provide it, for a price. Sometimes it's genuine fun. Often it's routine. At times, like we saw, it turns ugly. Through it all, the slaves and sex workers here survive by wit, by forming bonds, by numbing themselves, or by dreaming of something beyond these stone walls. You lean against a graffiti-covered pillar, taking a breather. Around you, the air is heavy with smoke and sweat. A lamp sputters, needing more oil. One of the girls, helpless, with striking dark eyes, comes out with an empty clay lamp and refills it from a jug, humming a tune under her breath. She's humming a popular tune from the taverns, something about Venus laughing, the normalcy of that small act. Refilling a lamp, humming a song, contrasts sharply with the extraordinary setting. It reminds you that for the people who lived this life, it was daily life. They had a routine, lighting lamps at dusk, maybe sweeping the floors in the morning, washing sheets, gossiping with each other between clients, stealing moments of rest. This was a job, albeit a grim and coerced one for most. You catch Helpus's eye as she notices you watching. "You all right there?" she asks kindly, as if you might be the one needing reassurance. You realize you probably look a bit stunned by all you've witnessed. You nod and offer a faint smile. Helpus smiles back, a genuine, tired, but understanding smile, then retreats to her room as a new man steps through the door. As midnight approaches, the flood slows to a trickle. The sailors are gone banned. In fact, unless they return sober and apologetic another day, the anxious young nobleman is gone too, likely slinking home before his family notices his absence. The baker, Marcus, gave Restituta one last affectionate kiss and slipped out earlier, promising to see her next week. She watched the door for a minute after he left, her face unreadable, before Felicia barked at her to clean up for the next client. A few clients still linger or arrive late. A drunken potter who had a good night's profits and is spending it on a tumble with whomever is free. Victoria obliges, though you can see she's tired, her hair's coming undone, ringlets sticking to her sweaty neck. There's also a timid teenager. Looks like a slave boy sent by his master to become a man, awkwardly handing Felicia a coin that's probably his master's money. Felicia, perhaps feeling maternal after this long night, assigns gentle Helpus to him with a soft, "Go easy on the kid." Amid the gradually quieting atmosphere, you find yourself standing near the entrance, where the night breeze sneaks in cooler and fresher. You take a deep breath of that air. It's a relief from the dense concoction of scents inside. Your head swims a bit. What a night it's been. Felicia is tallying coins at her small table. By a flickering lamp, she counts each denomination, separating them into little piles. There's a look of concentration on her face and a shadow of fatigue under her eyes. You wonder if she will get any sleep tonight after closing, or if she's up until dawn doing accounting. And then up again. When the sun heats these walls like an oven, managing a brothel can't be much easier than working in one, in terms of hours and stress, though certainly preferable in autonomy and dignity. For a moment, you see her not as a madam or a villain of the piece, but as a middle-aged woman trying to maintain order in a tiny, chaotic world, under pressure from the owner above and threats from unruly clients on the ground. Perhaps she, too, started as one of these girls 2 decades ago and clawed her way to this position. Her sternness and cynicism were likely hard-earned. She notices you looking and raises an eyebrow. Had enough for one night. There's a hint of a smirk. She likely assumes you partook of some services and are now spent. You just nod vaguely. Felicia shrugs and returns to her coin stacks, gently biting a denarius to test its silver. Some cheats circulate fakes. Satisfied, she tosses it onto a pile. You see she has a ledger tablet where she's marked each girl's earnings. The house will take the lion's share, of course. The girls might get a small cut or none at all if they are enslaved. Any that are free women renting a room here would owe Felicia a fee. In all cases, Felicia herself will take a cut and then pass the remainder up to the establishment's owner, perhaps a wealthy citizen who owns the building. Prostitution in Pompeii is profitable for those at the top. Emperor Caligula famously taxed prostitutes. Brothel owners register their workers, and even prostitutes have to pay a tax per client in Rome. In Pompeii, whether taxed or not, someone is making money off these transactions, and it's not the women on their backs. You lean out the doorway for a moment, looking at the stars. The streets are quieter now. though you hear distant music, perhaps a tavern or a private party still going. A couple of late-night passers-by scurry along, giving the brothel a wide berth or a furtive glance. It's funny, during the day, Pompeii's streets see respectable matrons doing their shopping and children playing. At night, a different population comes alive. The shadows of Pompeii hold these secrets. The brothels, the gambling dens, the rendezvous in dark gardens. By dawn, it'll all be swept up and hidden again. The city wearing its respectable face with no trace of the debauchery that transpired. Eventually, the final patron, a grizzled man with a cheap wreath askew on his head, perhaps from a birthday banquet gone awry, stumbles out, belt barely buckled, and disappears into the dark. All right, that's it. We're done, Felicia announces brusquely. One by one, the women emerge from their rooms, looking drained. Some are wrapped in thin shawls or sheets now. The facade of flirtation falls away, replaced by exhaustion. They look like any group of tired workers after a long shift, which in truth they are, albeit a kind of work most people couldn't fathom enduring. Restituta stretches her arms, cracking her neck. By Venus, my back is killing me. She groans to no one in particular. Another woman, Habenda, you recall her name from graffiti, replies with a weary chuckle. At least you got a soft merchant all night. I had 6 customers. 6. And one didn't even finish before he passed out on top of me. She rubs a sore spot on her collarbone. The others murmur, in sympathy or mild amusement. They trade a few complaints and anecdotes. Who was a quick one, who tried to get a free second round, whose breath smelled like garlic, and so on. There's a dark humor to it, a camaraderie born from shared trials. Felicia claps her hands sharply. All right, ladies, enough chatter. Clean up and then get some rest. Tomorrow's another day. She then eyes you, the last odd guest lingering. And you, out. It's not hostile, just businesslike. You've overstayed the typical visit, and dawn isn't far off. As you step back into the doorway, you hesitate and turn, taking one last look at the interior. The lamplight flickers on the peeling frescoes, making the painted lovers appear to writhe in the shadows. The graffiti on the walls overlaps in a chaos of voices. You run your fingers gently over a carved inscription near the door. Lucius amat Valeria. Lucius loves Valeria. A rare, sweet note amid the crude ones. Did a client fall for a girl named Valeria and carve that while waiting for her? Or did a bored prostitute carve that about a secret lover of her own? We'll never know. The walls keep their secrets beyond these tantalizing whispers. Madame Felicia catches your eye one last time. Perhaps she sees the mix of wonder and sadness in your expression. Her own face softens slightly. In a low voice meant only for you, she says, "Not what you expected." She doesn't wait for an answer. Instead, she gives a slight nod, almost respectful, and adds, "This is the way of the world, friend. Not pretty, but it's real. Now go on, and take care out there in the dark." You step out into the cool early morning. The door curtain falls behind you, muffling the last sounds from within. A cough, the clink of coins being put away, a quiet sob that someone is trying to stifle. Standing in the narrow street, you feel a strange weight on your chest. It's as if the spirits of that place, the accumulated sorrows and fleeting joys, have clung to you. The stars are beginning to fade, and a pale pre-dawn light touches the east. Over the silent rooftops of Pompeii, the hulking shape of Anton's Vesuvius looms, dark against the lightening sky. It's quiet, giving no hint of the catastrophe it holds in store. In a few hours, the city will wake to another hot August day. Bakers will heat their ovens. Shopkeepers will sweep their thresholds. The street fountains will gush fresh water. The lupanar, too, will stir again. The prostitutes will wash themselves with cold water from the well out back. Try to scrub off the scents of strangers from their skin. Maybe they'll snatch a few hours of sleep first on those hard beds. By afternoon, Felicia will have them ready again, dressed provocatively, smiles painted on, along with fresh eyeliner and rouge, and the nightly cycle will continue. Men, and some women, will come seeking what they desire, or what they cannot have in their proper lives. Indulgence, oblivion, excitement, or simply a human touch without strings. The brothel's walls will see it all and say nothing. Only we know they whisper, in their own way. But fate has a twist in store that no one in Pompeii can imagine on this dawn of 79 CE. In just a short time, days or weeks from this very morning, that looming mountain will explode with a violence beyond belief. Vesuvius will erupt, raining destruction on Pompeii. Fire, ash, and pumice will engulf the city. People will flee in panic. Many will not escape. The sky will turn black at noon. By the next dawn, Pompeii will be a buried tomb, silenced under meters of volcanic debris. The lupanar, this sturdy little den of desires, will be entombed as well, frozen in time, its lamps extinguished mid-activity, its final patrons and workers perhaps caught in their last moments of life. We don't know exactly what happened to each person we met tonight. Did Cressa, the frightened Greek girl, manage to run from the city with the chaos of the eruption, disappearing into an uncertain freedom? Or was she trapped in that cubicle, huddled in terror as ash filled her lungs? Archaeologists haven't found human remains in the lupanar itself that we know of. Maybe, just maybe, these people had a chance to escape when the tremors struck the brothel being near the east gate. Some could have gotten out. It's strangely possible that some of these downtrodden souls survived the doom that befell their rich and respectable neighbors, only to face the harsh Roman world elsewhere. What we do know is that when excavators tunneled into this buried structure over 600 years later, they found something remarkable. The walls still standing, the frescoes still vibrant, if a bit faded, and the graffiti, those hurried scratches of lust, pride, love, and longing, still legible on the plaster. The eruption, for all its horror, did one miraculous thing. It preserved the whispers on these walls. The names of Restituta, Victoria, Fortunata, Ias, Cressa, Habenda, Helpus, and many others were found here, etched by themselves or their clients. Reading them today, archaeologists can almost hear the banter and flirtations, the boasts and beseeching. Each graffiti is like a frozen whisper from 79 CE, calling out to us across millennia. Think about it. These prostitutes of Pompeii were among the most voiceless people in their society. Mostly enslaved, considered shameful, rarely mentioned by historians, except in passing. Yet through a quirk of fate, their own casual writings on a brothel wall have outlasted the grand literature and official records of so many greater citizens. We can stand in that very hallway now, tourists with audio guides, and trace the carved letters with our fingers, connecting intimately with those long-gone individuals. A cheeky Latin line, hic futui, scratched on the wall, literally brings us the unfiltered voice of an ordinary Pompeian in a way marble statues of emperors cannot. It's strangely poetic. The lowest of the low, brothel, visitors, and workers get the final word, immortalized by ash. As you walk away from the lupanar in the early light, roosters crowing in the distance, you carry those voices with you. The streets of Pompeii seem different now. You see a wealthy matron stepping out to buy fish, and you wonder if her husband was at the brothel last week. You see a pair of slaves hauling water, and think of Cressa's chained future. You pass a grand villa with a mosaic of the god Dionysus frolicking, and recall the crude fresco of Priapus in the brothel. The elite and the sordid reflecting each other. Pompeii, like Rome, is a place of contrasts, refined art and rampant vice, strict social norms and secret debauchery. There's no judging here. It was a society with its own logic. Prostitution was legal, taxed, and accepted as a social norm for men, even as the prostitutes themselves were shamed and kept at the margins. The Romans saw no contradiction in that. Perhaps we're not so different today. Think of modern societies that consume adult content voraciously, yet stigmatize those who create it. The whispers of Pompeii's walls sound eerily familiar across time. One particular inscription stays in your mind. That simple Eutychus, a Greek lass with sweet ways. 2 asses on the outside vestibule. Eutychus, her name meant lucky in Greek. Was she lucky? For a moment, you imagine her, maybe a girl from Athens or Corinth, sold off by a debt-ridden father, shipped to Pompeii, trying to use her sweet ways to survive. 2 asses was likely the price of her services, scrawled by either her pimp or a satisfied client. A life summed up in a few words and a number. It strikes you how each of these women and men in the brothel had their own rich inner life. Memories of childhood, hopes for the future, fears, small joys, like a favorite song or a friendship with a fellow prostitute. Nearly all of that is lost to time. What's left are these fragmentary whispers, names, prices, crude one-liners, and explicit snapshots on the walls. And yet, standing here centuries later, we can piece together their stories, or at least imagine them, from those fragments, in a way that keeps them alive. The walls whispered, and we listened. Before you leave the shadow of the lupanar, you reach out and touch its outer wall. The ancient brick is rough and cool. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you can almost hear echoes, soft laughter, a gasp, the murmur of a lullaby. A prostitute hums to herself to drown out a particularly rough client's grunts, a curse in Oscan, a drunken song, the sounds of a typical night in this place. Frozen in time, you step back and notice one more carving by the door, half covered in ivy. It reads, Set idus Augustus, hic ultima nocte. On the 7th Ides of August, here was the final night. It sends a shiver through you. Was it someone recording the date of the eruption's eve, not knowing it would be their last night on Earth? Or is it some romantic notion carved later by a survivor, memorializing this place? Either way, it eerily foretells an end. Looking up, the sunrise colors the sky in pink and gold. The sun's rays hit the top of Vesuvius, which now appears deceptively tranquil, with a wisp of cloud near the summit. Life, as of this dawn, goes on in Pompeii. Bakers bake, merchants haggle, the wealthy lounge in their gardens, and down that alley, behind closed shutters, the brothel sleeps, its walls holding in all those secrets for now. History will soon seal Pompeii in darkness, but much later, history will unearth it. When that happens, the lupanar will astonish the world. Tourists in the 19th century will blush at the frescoes. Early guides refuse to even mention them. Scholars in the 21st century will pore over the graffiti, analyzing what it reveals about literacy, language, and gender dynamics among commoners. They'll discover that graffiti was an interactive dialogue, some scratches replying to others in a call and response of macho boasting. They'll note that names on the walls show which women were slaves, versus freed a slave's single name, versus a freed woman's two names. They'll even identify women who likely came from the East, given names like Myrtle or Berenice, confirming that many sex workers were of Greek or Eastern origin, torn from their homelands by slavery. We'll learn that most prostitutes here were slaves, given only basic food and shelter, while their earnings all went to the brothel owner. They lived confined in these cells, rarely allowed outside, expected to always smile under threat of punishment. It's all there in the evidence, vindicating what our night of observation already made clear. This was exploitation at its core, dressed up as entertainment. And yet, the story isn't one note. Through those same whispering walls, we also get glimpses of humanity pushing through the cracks. A joke scratched by one prostitute to make her sisters laugh during a dull midday. A prayer scribbled in the corner. Yes, one graffiti says, "I pray to Venus for release." Who wrote that? A desperate girl or a yearning client? The comfort Marcus gave to Restituta, with a loaf of bread and genuine care. The flicker of defiance when Felicia struck that brute with her club to protect Aias. The resilience of these people, living day by day, under circumstances meant to break them, yet finding ways to laugh, to love, even if just for a moment. In those contradictions, the pain and the humor, the degradation and the camaraderie, lies the raw, unsanitized truth of life in Pompeii's brothels. This world wasn't a steamy romantic fantasy, nor was it unrelentingly bleak. 1747. It was a mix, messy, gritty, at times darkly comic, at times heartbreakingly sad. It was real, and we've tried to honor that reality tonight, without sugarcoating or moralizing, simply by listening to what the walls had to say. As you walk away down the quiet street, the sun now peeking over the city's tiled roofs, you carry with you a newfound understanding. The next time you or anyone hears about Pompeii's erotic frescoes or chuckles at some lewd graffiti in a museum, you'll remember the people behind them. The young man carving "I was here and I had a great time" might have been overcompensating for loneliness. The woman who painted those seductive scenes above each door, did she ever imagine they'd titillate people centuries later? Or was she just earning her commission? The walls whisper, but we must interpret. Their whisper is saying, we lived, we laughed, we cried, we worked, we hoped, we suffered. Don't just see us as dirty caricatures in a dirty ruin. We were sons, daughters, lovers, dreamers. Our names were Ania, Fabia, Drauca, Maritus, Servius. So many names are scratched here. We existed in the margins, but we existed. In the end, the brothels of Pompeii are a paradoxical legacy. They are places of pain that have yielded valuable insight. They remind us that the past wasn't all marble temples and heroes. It was also cramped rooms and everyday people trying to get by. The whispers on the walls bridge the gap between their world and ours with startling intimacy. Through them, we meet the Romans not as distant marble statues, but as fellow humans. Flawed, passionate, and resilient, turning one last time. You see the lupanar's outline in the morning light. The madam has shuttered the windows. From inside, no more sounds. Presumably, the women have collapsed onto their beds or pallets for some well-earned sleep. The alley is silent except for a distant rooster crow and the babble of a fountain. You run your hand along the wall and feel the engraved letters of a graffito under your fingertips. The texture of each groove is a direct touch across time with the person who carved it. It reads, Facilis hic futuit. Facilis screwed here easily. You chuckle softly. What a legacy to leave. Facilis, But somehow, it makes you feel Facilis's presence, cheeky and bragging, probably scratching that into the plaster while buttoning up his tunic one night. With that gentle laugh, you shake off the heaviness a bit. The people of Pompeii, even in their struggles, weren't so different from us. They had humor in dark times. They had cravings and coping mechanisms, and though a volcano tried to erase them, their own hands ensured that some record of their inner worlds would survive. Walking back into the wider street, you feel the first rays of sun on your face. The city is beginning to stir. A fruit seller pushes his cart, giving you a curious glance as to why you're out here at this hour. You just smile and carry on. The stories of the lupanar safe in your memory as we leave this tale. Let's take a moment to reflect on what we've heard. The walls whispered, and we did our best to listen with empathy. If you found value in hearing these ancient voices brought to life, give this story a like so more people can discover it, and share your thoughts or feelings in the comments. Perhaps which part moved or surprised you, or simply say hello from your corner of the world. Pompeii's brothels remind us that history is not just dates and battles, but the sum of countless human lives. Messy, sensual, sorrowful, resilient. In their faded frescoes and scrawled graffiti, if we listen closely, we might hear echoes not just of their past, but of timeless truths about society and ourselves. The sun climbs higher, and the spell of the night is fully broken. Yet the whispers linger, carrying lessons and questions. As you step forward into the new day, you carry a piece of Pompeii with you. Perhaps tonight, when the world is quiet, you'll close your eyes and still hear it. The soft giggle, the clink of a coin, the sigh of longing, the walls of Pompeii still whispering across 2,000 years.